It's interesting that I change so much, but it's often when opportunities came my way and I look at it and assess, is that the good thing? How do I feel about it from my heart? I also went to spend a couple years teaching Chinese to students studying at the American International School. And those kids are often, their parents are diplomats. They can be factory owners, business owners, or they're expats. And that was my very first kind of interaction with people coming from all over the world and such an international environment. And from there, it was a very interesting opportunity that my manager back then was tasked by Black Diamond, a rock climbing and skiing equipment company based in Salt Lake, to set up warehousing logistics in China. And he was really needing someone who speak English, but also ideally rock clients understand the company culture.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun at all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today's episode is brought to you by Palacio and Partners, providing turnkey podcast creation, hosting, production, promotion, and related creative resources for you and your business. Today, Jeff is interviewing Fiona Lin. Fiona is a global business transformational leader with a track record of driving growth across fintech, consumer goods, and manufacturing. Having scaled businesses in the U.S. and China, she excels at simplifying complexity, from product innovation to margin improvement. Fiona earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in English and Chinese from Sun Yat-sen University and an MBA from the University of Utah. She is currently a fractional COO with Intune Transformation. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Fiona.
Fiona, welcome to the Corporate Couch this morning.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yes, I'm very excited to have you on for a couple of reasons. One, you're the first guest that we actually match. We have matching sweaters on, and that wasn't pre-planned. But William Godwin introduced us, and I was so glad. We met a couple of weeks ago for tea. We both had green tea, I believe, and just your energy that comes when I saw you. You're just this small but mighty person with overflowing with great energy. So it was very fun. And you're our first guest born in China. So that's another first for the Corporate Couch. So we're going to have fun. You've been in a lot of different industries, fintech, consumer electronics, mining, manufacturing, a lot of supply chain, COO type roles, as well as some marketing and sales ops. So it's going to be fun. Let's start with a fun question. How about even people that know you fairly well, Fiona? What one thing would surprise them about you?
Ooh, one thing. I don't talk about this a lot. I feel bad of saying it. I never grew up with dogs as pets in the house. It's always a watchdog in China, like a long time ago. So I'm a little bit scared of dogs.
Okay.
And I feel bad of saying that. That's one thing. I love doing volunteer type of work. And earlier, I spent 20 years growing like more than 60 inches of hair that I donated to lots of love. Kids
Wow,
with
60
cancer.
inches?
Yeah.
Wow.
It takes 2 years to grow 10 to 12, enough to donate.
Wow. Wow.
It's kind of painful. I'm not very comfortable when it gets really long, but something I was doing for a long time.
Yeah. So where did you grow up in China, and what was fun for you? What did you love doing as a child?
I grew up in southern China. Where I was born is the closest distance to Taiwan, across the Taiwan Channel. So going to Taipei is a 1.5 hour flight, like very close. When I grew up, what do I enjoy doing the most? Playing with friends, like my kids were very surprised and feel interesting that I never really grew up with pets or I didn't have like toys or like stuffed animals. It's not something part of my childhood, but I had a lot of fun. You imagine a lot of games, you play with rocks, you dig a trench, or you go and like destroy some of the watermelons in the field, you caught fish in the little river. I
Yeah.
think a lot of time playing outside, that was kind of my childhood memory.
Yeah. So, any aspirations as a child, like when I grow up, I'm gonna do this? What was this for you, if you had one?
Funny you asked that question. When I was very young, I would say maybe like elementary school, middle school, I really wanted to become a flight attendant. And then I think, flight attendants, like they always look so elegant, like they greet people with smile. I don't know why I had that dream.
Well,
But
most of them hopefully do. Some do not.
I think most of them, but it's a really tough job, right? So, but later in middle school and high school, I was just fascinated with the idea that I wanted to become a diplomat.
Oh, nice.
I don't know why. Maybe watching, the Chinese CCTV channels, you've seen those very fluent, like individuals speaking different language fluently, tag along the delegates to different countries. That's always been my dream until the last few months of high school when I had to when we were preparing for the national entrance examination, I have to completely change my direction.
And what happened there on during that testing?
Not during the testing, but I couldn't apply to become a diplomat because of the height requirements. It's kind of weird to say that.
Really?
30 years ago, I know a lot of things probably already changed, but back in the old days, yes, height was one requirement. And you know how petite I am.
You, you're. That's what I said. You're small but mighty. You have a big presence. Trust me. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, Fiona, for the average American citizen, like, what is the biggest misconception of people, the Chinese nation?
I think can be multiple areas, but one thing, for example, like China is such a big country. Like maybe less about perception, like just China is so big. People in China, they speak so many different dialects.
Right.
And, I met with individuals, they know that English is not my first language, not my native language. I spoke dialects growing up. And then when I was 8 years old, I started learning Mandarin Chinese. And then when I was 13, I started learning English. I couldn't speak English until I was in college. So China is so big. People in different parts of the country, they all speak different languages, different cuisines. I wouldn't say like, I can't think about like a perception. Chinese people are extremely hardworking, I have to say, at least the generation I grew up and my dad's generation. Factory work is really hard. People are living very different kinds of life now because of the rich and poor gap continues to become like wider.
Yeah. Interesting. And is the school system the same from, like, 5 years old to 18-ish in China as it is in the United States?
Similar in a way. Similar in the way that you go to elementary school and middle school and high school, and you go to college when you are 18 years old. But in China, when I went to school in 2019, 99-ish, like you have to finish school in 4 years. There's just no such thing. You can take 6 years or you can change majors. So the system back then, a lot of things have changed now. The system back then is I have to choose my major before I went to school. And
Wow.
because of all this preparation, heading to the national exam, I kind of know my ability to test during those exams. So it's a 2.5 days test for 5 subjects, very intense 4 hours. You go back home, eat lunch, and come back for another test. So
Wow.
it's a lot of pressure on.
Wow. And so you're 18 and you have to pick a major, and that's the major from the beginning of college, university, to the end.
Yes, that's
No,
what
no changing majors.
I don't know what is now, I haven't
Right, right. But
very
when you went,
closely,
yeah,
but that's
that's
what we
very, most guests on the corporate couch have changed their majors, I would say, but
My
none of
husband
them,
changed major a couple times
none of
too.
them went to university in China either, though. So
Yeah,
there
for
you go.
everybody.
And why'd you pick? It looked like you had a Bachelor of Arts. It looked like English and Chinese is was
I
what
love
why'd you pick that?
I love languages. Like nowadays, I still like every day before I pick up my first appointment, on the way driving across the states, my first thing is listening to a French podcast. I just throughout my life, I always love learning languages. So wanting to major in English to continue pursuing the path I related to international trade was my dream. But back in the old days, like certain universities only open certain majors to different provinces. Provinces in China is like states. So I actually couldn't pick my first major. I had to pick a different major.
Tell the audience about your first job out of college and how'd you get it?
First job out of college, I became an English teacher, teaching Chinese students, adults, English at a very well-known Chinese language training school. I
Okay.
thought I went back to pursue my dream. I betrayed my classmates, my professors in the Chinese language and literature department. That was my dream.
I also saw in college you were the program director of your college's
Oh my gosh, I still have
broadcast
that
station.
information. I totally need to take it out. Like, I
It's on
didn't.
your LinkedIn, so I thought, well, is that TV, radio? Like, what was your?
Yeah, it's a radio station.
Wow.
I was majoring in Chinese language literature, and I was minor in English, and also spent 2 years learning Japanese. I
Yeah.
didn't go through the certification process, but I took 2 years of Japanese. So at that time, I was hosting the broadcasting station, speaking, sharing news in English with my university like cohorts.
Wow. Yeah. This is for another podcast, but in college, one of my friends was a DJ, and we had been doing some day drinking, and we went into the radio station and we started playing the records and saying probably profane things that we never got caught, but there you go. So Manhattan University, don't take my degree away, please. So when did you make the pivot? So you're a teacher, and then you become this vendor management, logistics, supply chain person. How tell us about that transition?
It's interesting that I changed so much, but it's often when opportunities came my way and I look at it and assess, is that the good thing? How do I feel about it from my heart? So after that teaching job, I also went to spend a couple years teaching Chinese to students studying at the American International School. And those kids are often, their parents are diplomats. They can be factory owners, business owners, or they're expats transferred to China to live there for a few years and then move on. And that was my very first kind of interaction with people coming from all over the world and such an international like environment. And from there, it was a very interesting opportunity that my manager back then was tasked by Black Diamond, a rock climbing and skiing equipment company based in Salt Lake, to set up warehousing logistics in China. And he was really needing someone who speak English, but also ideally rock clients understand the company culture. I believe that he talked to many people in the climbing community, and later one guy become Blood Diamond's distributor, knows me from rock climbing. And Blood Diamond also use expediters as a freight forwarder, but my sister works in that company. So through multiple these kind of relationships and introductions, I was hired to be his right hand to set up Blood Diamond Equipment Asia in southern China.
Wow.
That's how I transitioned to the first corporate job.
Yeah. Wow. So how you're what? How old? About 23, 24 at this
Very
time?
young, very young. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was about 24, 25.
Wow. So I mean, like that's a that's that's a lot. Like even for somebody that was a business major, and this 24-year-old, that's going to be a lot. So what was your learning process? What was kind of big ahas at that point in your taking that job?
I feel maybe when you were younger, you were more like fearless. You didn't know what you didn't know. You are just charging forward. And I was so fortunate that my manager is one of the best mentors I have ever had in my career. I was very fortunate to have many amazing managers that shaped my leadership style. And I think we were just learning along the way. The first thing I needed to do is to help Black Diamond secure business license. And for any of us living in US, setting up LLC is taking 10 minutes. But in China, it's a very lengthy process. You need to go through like 5, 7 plus business bureaus to go and get their stamp. And I spent a lot of time securing the business license in 1 month. You might think, oh my gosh, 1 month is such a long period of time. But that was compared to if you hire a consulting firm, it would usually take them 4 months. So I think I established my reputation back
Wow.
then. I will just go and do everything I can, be as creative as I can. I wait in front of the door for the bureau to open. I ask them questions. Last time I came here, you told me you need this document. I brought it here, and you asked me 3 more documents. I started having conversations with individual, and could you give me a list of everything you need? Next time when I come back, can we just make this really easy? I think I was never afraid of asking questions, to challenging in a polite, diplomatic manner. So I think that was very helpful to do some crazy stuff like early in my career.
I know you spent about 4 years at Black Diamond. Talk about your career progression, because you were in vendor management, supply chain manufacturing, and then, which is kind of one set of, skills and expertise. But then you also launched the marketing and sales ops initiative and team. So talk about that,
Yeah.
that learning process.
So I was the first employee hire in the local office, and also the first only employee that actually rock climbs. But I'm really curious about employee truly understand the products, because we are making personal safety equipment. It's really important that we manufacture to the highest safety standard possible. And I was also involved in a lot of conversations, listening in, lots of strategy developments. Are we really going to make this as a warehousing, or should we really set it up as a full spectrum office with logistics support, with vendor management, helping sourcing products in China, consolidate them all in the free trade zone in southern China, brings a lot of benefits. And I continue supporting these efforts, but I think that's kind of part of who I am. I have to make peace with it. I get bored to a certain level when I don't feel like it's challenging enough. So I started kind of like brainstorming ideas with my managers, and there's a tremendous opportunity in supporting the greater China market. Everything, collateral, marketing collateral, everything was in English. And with my language skills, I was talking and convincing the leadership team, we need to have a Chinese language website for whatever is created in the United States. Let's take advantage of that. Let's try to create this website, share these marketing collaterals for our local market, including Hong Kong, Taiwan, mainland China, all those offices. And also because I was so immersed in the local rock climbing community, I talked to the folks a lot. And naturally, I stepped into this role, started conducting a lot of training sessions to retailer stores, to distributor offices on how to use a product. And for me, knowing how to use a product is so important. Knowing the customers who are using your product, what's going through their head, and how does our products compare to the competitors. You have to be in the field to gather those intelligence so that you can provide this feedback back to the US office for redesigning or improving the design of the products.
It's innate to you and I that you would do that, but like other companies, they don't, oh, we have to talk to the customer.
So true, so true. Yeah, yeah. So true.
I have to ask, do you still rock climb today?
Not in Kansas City,
Right.
in Salt Lake City, where we moved from, yes. When we came here to look at Kansas City for the first time, we actually scouted a few places and didn't feel like we have discovered some cracks really stable and like very good place to go to. So we haven't.
Yeah. Okay.
But
So,
I've been mountain biking a lot. I have to try to enjoy like what I really have here.
yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, there's a lot of great trails for mountain biking here in Kansas City. So, look like after about 4 years at Black Diamond, you made a decision to get your MBA. What was the impetus to that?
Um, so wanting to study business always just my dream, like from college. When I was second year in college, like my dad's business didn't do very well. He had to file bankruptcy. That was quite a kind of traumatic event back then. But back then, I think I handled it in such a weird way. I don't even know how to comprehend now. I felt back then something that is so traumatic. If I can go through that, it's going to make me stronger. So for many years, I've been thinking and wanting to find a way to learn about what really happened back then. When I grew up, I know my mom and dad, like they were really hard. My dad has done so many different business. My husband was sharing with friends this weekend, you would think it's wow, doesn't cannot really connect that much. My dad has a trucking business, had always a sequence of small business along the way, trucking business, gas station, and toothpick manufacturing.
Toothpicks.
Toothpicks, yes.
Nice.
My hometown produces a lot of bamboo, and using bamboo is so much more efficient and sustainable than using wood. So he had a lot of different business. And when I thought back about that, the cash flow was such a major issue. Like just being able to pay your vendors, but also collecting the payment from the customer. What is the cycle that you go through? And can you like the ability you need to be able to project your cash flow? I think that was one of the major challenges. So I always wanting to figure out and piece things together. If when I was younger, if I had paid attention to what was going on in this environment, what could I have learned? So that has always been a desire. And the reason I went to Black Diamond was also my back then manager was telling me that he had an MBA degree, he had a law degree. If you want to learn about business, I'm going to teach you everything you can. You're going to get half your MBA degree by working with me. So I was so at the time.
Right, right.
Well, yeah, wanting to go to US to study, it just always been a dream, like in my life.
Yeah, yeah. So you're at the University of Utah, get your MBA, and then looks like you get into the mining industry with Rio Tinto.
Yes,
Yeah.
Rio Tinto had a very large presence, has a copper mine in Utah. And like getting the MBA and going through the journey, I to my manager's suggestion to just take a lot of courses in finance and accounting. I always thought marketing sales is my pursuit, but I took a detour and I took a step further to join the finance. Back then they call it like the strategy investment department.
Oh
I
wow.
really think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Good to know how to count and make the money, right? It's
Important. The
both.
number, knowing about the balance sheet, income statement, and all the lines goes into is very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about your kind of career progression and as well as you spent your first job as, in China for Black Diamond. So now you're cross border, cross cultural. What was the big difference of, working with people mostly born in the US, I'm assuming, when you're working for the companies in Utah versus, the kind of the Chinese workers, and how did that shape your leadership style?
I think for me, working in China, not in the headquarter in US, and I was very fortunate that I had such a group of like amazing colleagues to work with. When I was working in China, my cohorts and my like managers really empower me. Like they gave me a lot of leeway to go and try and do the things I believe can make a difference for the office, including vendor development, vendor relationship management, like bringing the products to be produced in China. I feel I was in this like state that I feel everything is possible, and I was a very strong contributor to the success of the company. I think later when I working in the US in headquarters, that when we are working with the team members in China and in Costa Rica, it really changed how I interact with those individuals. Often folks in satellite offices, not no headquarters, there's a tendency or there's a belief that they are just there to help execute. I look at it totally differently. I think my colleagues working with factories every day, they have so much more market intelligence. They know exactly what can go wrong, what could be a good way to improve the product. And my Costa Rican colleagues who are working with developers, software developers all day long, they know what they are challenging with. So I think for me, what makes it really special is I work with them. I don't want them to be the task taker. I want them to be the forefront. I want them to be involved in the decision making because I believe that they carry so much more knowledge that I might not have.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Well, talk about why did you make some of the moves? So you were at Rio Tinto for 4 years. Not only you're doing, the kind of the vendor management, the supply chain and manufacturing, but then you move to consumer electronics and looked like with Zag, and you get this global project management organization role, and throw in launching Microsoft CRM also. But talk about that transition.
So Rio Tinto was very intentionally taking some risk to join the finance team. I was not the smartest person on the team. My manager really sees the skill sets I have in having very difficult conversations with senior leaders. I was tasked with running the investment committee with the C-suite and working with the C-suite, like help me understand how they ask questions. So I have developed my very individual playbook. When I am coaching the manufacturing plant GMs to provide their business case, I coach them through what the questions you need to prepare for. That was such a wonderful experience. And later, I was recruited by the global sales and marketing leader to join the sales marketing team. They know that was my kind of like previous background. And that was what I was thinking as well. But I have found and discovered that I didn't really enjoy commodity trading. I like consumer goods marketing sales like much more. There's so much more creativity that goes into it. And when my husband was looking for opportunities, he found this job with Zach, asked me to apply, and I got a job, like not with a lot of effort. So I had such a great ride with Zach, with a consumer electronics company. My manager COO was really valuing my experience from China. I feel like I was bringing my whole together with my Chinese background. And at Zach, did a lot of really fun things. And when we were chatting about the late night talk show CEO, that was from Zach.
Are you drowning in boring corporate communications? Palacio and Partners is here to rescue you. We transform internal podcasts from snooze fest to must-listen content that actually connects your team and strengthens your culture. Imagine podcast episodes that make your employees laugh while staying informed. Our founder, Jeff Palacio, doesn't just create podcasts, he creates conversations that break through the noise. Whether you're a growing startup or a massive corporation, we turn your company's story into audio gold. Leadership becomes human. Remote teams feel connected. Your message cuts through the clutter. Palacio and Partners, where corporate communications gets a fun makeover. Let's make your podcast work harder than your email inbox ever could. Jeff is happy to share his insights on podcasting with you. You can contact him via LinkedIn or schedule a Zoom call via the link in the episode description.
When we were chatting about the late night talk show CEO, that was from Zach.
Yeah, talk about that. You mentioned that when we had tea when we met, but yeah, I love this late night talk show CEO thing. So talk about that.
So that was such a unique place. That's where I see how intentional you can be with the culture and what kind of power you can actually create among the team members. I know that you talk about, you wish the quarterly updates or all hands is more like less of an update, more like a late night talk show. That's how I experience. I think every month when we have the all hands, it was so much vibe going on. There's so much excitement. There's the music playing, celebrating the wins and talk about the challenges. Our CEO back then, Randy Hales, one of my most respected CEOs in my career, he did such a great job to boost the team's energy. And every time he asks a question, he tells the team members, you have the choice every day. You choose to come into the door of Zach. We appreciate you. He's continuing constantly finding every opportunity, telling the team members how much they appreciate him. I think that means a lot.
Yeah, I'm just amazed at CEOs that don't even think about, like, I don't understand, like, why doesn't every CEO want their company to be the best company to work for? Like, it goes without say. So I love that.
Yeah, it definitely takes a lot of intentionality and continuous effort to build that.
Yeah. So you love Zag. So why'd you leave to go into the fintech with Snap Finance?
For Zach, there are a lot of really interesting things and continue the vendor management part. And my COO bring along as the only Chinese employee in the US headquarters. There are a lot of cost savings and building global revenue retention program revamping how physical products should be developed, can be developed by incorporating the voice of customer. That's something I just always feel very strong about. The reason I left that, I was recruited by a headhunter to FinTech and was very fascinated by the technology side of the business. Naturally, comparing where I was, if I could continue learn and improve, I feel like my learning was slowed down quite a bit. And also the environment will change quite a bit, like the culture. After 4 years at that, it was changing in a direction that I didn't feel quite aligned with.
You worked in China, you come to the US and work, you get your MBA here also. Going through your LinkedIn, it's just the phenomenal accomplishments and major transformations and all those things. And I know based on our conversation today, as well as when we had tea, you're passionate about people and, change management and leadership. What do you find, Fiona, to kind of be the most underrated human factor when companies go through major transformations?
Such a great question. I have led a lot of transformations. You look at Black Diamond set up its operations in China, and later they are going through complete different, like the complete transformation of product development and also margin transformation. As now finance as a fintech leader going through agile transformation. I think going through those efforts, I always feel the people side of the change is always the hardest. It's like no doubt you
Yeah.
can find the elegant solution, a system, technology, but if you don't activate the human side of the tech, like psychology of people to lead them through the changes, you won't be able to sustain it. It's impossible.
Yeah.
And when we go through those efforts, we talk about the people, the technology, the process, the data. People for me is always the number one. You have to treat that as the most critical part.
Yeah. I mean, people do not like change.
People can be going through the fatigue of changes as well. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Whether they're used to doing something the same way for a long time, and here comes, sweeping changes. So, what are some of the things you do to make that process of change easier for the teams and the people of the company?
I think involving people in the very early processes to learn about what they are doing things, in like Lean Six Sigma, going through the Lean Six Sigma, this kind of phase of training, it's very important that you shadow how people do the work, asking them questions about what is really challenging for you, how are you really doing it, involving them in the design of the process, in the selection of the technology, the systems, bring them along, showing them, involve them in the demonstrations of possible solutions, asking them the pros and cons. So teams will feel like this is something I want as well. I am in the decision-making matrix here. It's not just something pushing down to me. Nobody wants to be told what to
Right.
do. But if you involve them, you hear them about, you talk to them, you really value their input, make them the heroes of the transformation, make them the heroes of all the changes that you're trying to implement. I think that's something almost like it's a
Yeah.
natural way for me to think about things.
Yeah, I went through an SAP implementation. No one has a great story with SAP implementations, like no one. but
Yeah, yeah.
but one of the things, and I'd love your opinion since you've done so many of these just major transformations. So like I'm involved in it, and it's my, like I have other things I have to do that I
Yeah,
signed
yeah.
up for. Like I didn't sign up for an SAP implementation, but I'm the lead for sales and marketing for SAP. And it's kind of like a job I didn't want. So what kind of your thoughts to kind of bring people in? Obviously I did. I'm a leader of one of the leaders of the company. I'm going to do the job, but just would love your thoughts on that part of it.
Yeah, I think, it's so common that individual got tasks, so much more. Okay, this is priority one, let's do more, oh, this is something we can't really miss, let's do another one. I did quite a bit of the capacity planning and trying to figure out what can we really need to do to have a true understanding of the capacity that we have. And when priority changes, how are we going to communicate? Are we going to have a trade-off conversation? Why are we changing the priority? But I know that leaders always have this eagle eye in spotting great opportunities. they sense the market condition change, we will want to grab it. But if the execution team, they don't understand why the priority change and what they need to do differently, it's going to create a gap. But going through the capacity planning process, talking to the functional leaders, help them understand this is what we need, one of your top performers to give this much time to support this ERP transformation. Continue asking questions, making sure that teams really truly have the bandwidth to do that. And they also see that ERP transformation implementation is one of the core priorities. I think those conversations, you can't really skip that.
Yeah. And just an aside, going through an SAP implementation, I'm shocked that it's the leading ERP system in the world. But that's an aside. Anyhow, let's talk about, well, I'd like to talk about you kind of in the same vein. You're like a strategist, ops, technology, marketing person. You're at that intersection. But did you have any aha moments that changed the way you think about how to scale a business successfully?
I do. I think especially the last workplaces I was with, consumer electronics and fintech, like stepping into the role, working with exec team on a daily basis, but also boots on the ground, working with teams on the execution side. The challenge is always, I feel, is a disconnect between the strategy and the execution. And, we know that there is such a good, healthy push and pull mechanism between the leaders and the team. The leaders are always pushing the teams to do more, accomplish more. I think that's so wonderful. But it's interesting that when I was preparing for the workshop delivery, I did some research about like strategy, development, and execution. And from a 2017 Harvard Business Review research and article published, it was saying that only 8% of the leaders indicated that they excel both strategy and execution. I was really shocked when I see the number. But the more I think about it, I don't know how it has changed since the very latest data they were able to pull from 2017. But I think the disconnect between the strategy and execution can create so much unnecessary friction among the teams. So when I'm running and preparing the strategic planning workshops with leaders, I always talk about, the strategy development. It can take a couple of days of side. I wouldn't say it's relatively easy, but we can develop the vision, we can design what our strategic goals are, but how to realize them, I think is always the hardest part.
Right.
You don't want to come back 1 year later, we still talk about the things we shared last year want to do. How are you going to track those efforts? And when things got derailed, how are you going to course correct? If you don't have a tracking mechanism, if you don't continue going back to review, revisit them, it's difficult to see the progress made. And also finding a way allowing teams to escalate when they experience challenges, so the leaders can be in the position to remove the roadblocks and making decisions as fast as possible.
Right. Yeah, it's so interesting. And I know you talk about this quarterback concept, which is I find interesting since you didn't know who Joe Namath was, but you're using a football analogy. But talk about that in terms of your thinking and thought process.
Yeah, I don't know what day I came up with this quarterback idea. In some organizations, they would call this individual as chief of staff. And I have been doing the chief of staff quarterback job for a very long time in my career, but I never wear this official title. And I love the quarterback concept. And for me, when I'm looking organizations, when they want to scale and getting bigger, you can't ask the executive team to follow through each of the initiative where things are. And execution team need to understand when the priority change, why do we change, what do they need to do differently? And someone also need to be in the position to measure the progress. And the mid-management team, they are the liaison. You need to communicate to them so they can share the why behind the purpose behind it with execution team. But there's this missing piece. If someone who can fix this disconnect is a quarterback, this person has a seat at the table. We talk about a seat at the table as such a kind of vague concept. What I mean that is they are involved in the strategic planning sessions with executive team. They know the why behind it. They know the reasons of why we set the vision, the way we set it, why we need to set this initiatives as a priorities, but they are also diplomatic enough. They can ask difficult questions. They are courageous. They can challenge some of the views and perceptions, and they also have this empathy with execution team. I think this quarterback, if they do the job well, they can truly find a way to fix the disconnect between the strategy development and the execution side. And that's when I talk about you can define the individual, doesn't matter the title or doesn't really matter, but you need someone you can identify internally that are truly embedded into the day-to-day work and truly can see, pull themselves up at a 30,000 feet level, understand the why behind it on the strategy.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that concept. Thank you. Talk about your transition from living in Utah, having a major role at Snap Finance, and then moving to Kansas City. So talk about that transition and going out on your own as a fractional COO.
At one point, I thought this transition across states is harder than across countries and continent when I moved from China to US. I think when you get older, there's so much more, right? You know,
Right.
and my kids, they are in sixth grade and second grade. Before we made a decision, we were very intentional wanting to involve them, making them inform this other decision we're making. We're moving to Kansas City to support Dad's career. And that was a very intentional move. It was harder than I thought. When kids going through the challenges didn't feel, especially the first few months going to summer camp, they didn't know anyone. They come home, so this is so boring. I really didn't enjoy. I think it hurts your heart. It's like,
Yeah.
did we do something wrong? What can we do better? So I took a few months off to really help them go through the transition. That was one of the best decisions I think I made. It's so important and so critical. If I just charge forward without considering their needs, I think I will regret later in my life. And doing consulting is always something I feel fascinated with in my life. Never found the perfect time. Worked with a lot of consultants when I was in the corporate role, and now the sea has changed, the role has changed. It helps me learn so much more, so much stuff that I was not really good at. But I feel when I'm pushing myself, getting out of the comfort zone, like I got to stretch and I got to learn so much more.
Right. What was your big kind of aha just going out on your own? I mean, it's one thing to be, an executive at a company, getting a paycheck every 2 weeks, getting a large bonus, but going out on your own it's different. What was the things that surprised you when you did that?
Be very comfortable with the things that are uncomfortable, and certain things you cannot just control the pace. I cannot control the timing, but what I can do is I can always give it 120% the best of myself. Aha moments, like I was in sales operations roles before, I was in marketing. I do not necessarily feel I am such a strong business development person. There are individuals so much better than me. But I know that once I am in action, that's where I shine the most. And every client I work with, when they see how I function as an individual, I truly care about them. I truly take their interest to dear to heart. And when I'm able to make the impact, and that's also something interesting working with client is relatively smaller size business, how can you be so intentional? Always think about how to measure. That can be some part that can be neglected. But when we're able to develop the baseline and when I can show them the results I was able to bring to their organization within a short period of time, we have data there to show. We give the credits to the team who is really being immersed in these changes. I think not easy, definitely recognize what I'm best at and continue harness those parts, and continue to treat that as a learning process. That's just part of the life experience. I look at it that way.
This happens to a lot of people that want to continue on professionally outside of a company and be a consultant or fractional C-suite executive or whatever it is. But it's one thing, like I said, to be have a C in front of your title,
Yes.
and then everybody like, oh, you have a big title, so employees, business partners, they all give you a lot of prestige and all that. But when you walk out the door and you're just one of many, many people out there as a consultant, the hard part is getting the business, right? Because that's the part, even if you have a sales and marketing background, it's still the hard part, I think. And
Definitely, yeah.
was there any one or two things, whether a book, a person, that helped you hone your business development skills, or any learnings there to help other people in your shoes?
There are so many individuals. I met so many wonderful individuals. Like Jeff, you are one of them. Frank Benur, Alana Mueller, and Denise. I met her recently. Beth Ward, like Bob Hayworth, Ken White. Like you name it. I joke about how I had more than 200 coffees last year with people. I never had this much coffee like in 15 years. Like, and it's made me really appreciate that as well. I think something I have learned in this place is building the relationship. And building relationship is always very important to me, even when I was working in the finance department. Like, I don't just do financial modeling at the desk. I pick up the phone, drive to the plant to talk to the GM. I know how important building relationship is, but this has really got elevated to the different level. And lots of books I read, continuously, but I think just continue, put yourself out there, be seen, and just the more you give, I think the more opportunities opens out the door. When I meet people, I think about what it can help them. Hey, there's some referral synergy. I think you two can really like learn from each other. I always think about, I spend so much time connecting people. The connector work in this local place here has really changed me and helped me learn more about how to be a better connector, how to be there for people.
Many of those people, or if not all of them you mentioned, I know or have met with or are friends with. But yeah, I mean, it's about the relationships, and for you to have the not I'm making a generalization here, people, but a lot of finance people do not want to talk to anyone. But yeah, I love that. You're kind of a born relationship builder. So what kind of companies suit you best? Well, who can you help the most in what you do? Describe that company.
I don't really mind the industry. I think with my experience, I see how my skill sets are very transferable. What you learn in one place, you can take it with you to apply to different places. Like business who are really looking to scale and they are struggling to continue driving their revenue growth. I think often need to take a step back to see whether they have the foundation built strong enough. For example, one business wants to really scale their revenue, but if their directors are so embedded into the day-to-day, the sales directors, they are not really rethink about the strategy, training the team to go and like get the customers. Like take a step back, think about what you can do differently and how to continue delegate and making sure that individuals are really thriving in the position they are. We need to put the right people in the right seats. And for all my career, I think early days, I worked so much more in the marketing, sales, operation, finance. But more recently, in operations and technology, it's all about building a strong foundation and optimizing your operations, leveraging technology to make it so much easier to do the work. So business that see and feel the pain, have the desire to do things differently, and knowing that it's not going to be easy. Changes are not easy, but if you have the desire, you have the discipline and commitment to making those changes, I think we can work on it and really make a like big impact.
Yeah, I love that. Fiona, as you know, I'd love to help two groups of people. One's that recent college graduates. We're talking here on April 9th, 2025. Next month, everybody's graduating. What advice do you have for them as they navigate their first post-college career job search?
Love that question. Love it. Love it. I was sitting on the business school board in Utah for many years and supporting many hundreds of students through their journey. If I look back and something I did as well is don't care too much about the title, don't care about the money. If you do great work, focus on the learning, all those things will follow later down the road. And early in your career, you might be so much focused on building the technical skills, but the relationship building is never just too early or too late. And building those relationships and really taking the time to nurture it, always think about what you can do to help the others. I think the world can see that. You will be seen, and your warmth can go a long way to help those individuals. And Jeff, I appreciate you being mentoring, coaching those students as well.
It's a pleasure. I love doing it. So thank you for that. The second group, I love your advice, is that group that decides their career journey is going to be, I'm going to be on an org chart, starting as a manager, have people under me that I'm responsible for. When they take that first managerial role and are responsible for a team of people, what leadership advice do you have for them?
The hardest thing, I being the manager role since very early days, the hardest thing I was doing is letting people go. As a leader, you might be like I think I hire a lot of great individuals, but sometimes when you are desperate in hiring, when you have such a big gap, you need to fill, you might be blindsided. I think for those individuals, finding a few mentors in the organization that you can learn from, like continue like observing how they're interacting with individuals. There's one gentleman from Snap Finance, like he has such a tremendous impact on me. I observe and watch how he interact with people. He is always so complimentary from the deep inside from his heart. I don't see that as fake at all. And he always can find the highlights, the best part of the individual. That's what he focuses on. And I think for younger managers, be very willing to learn and be open to adjust approaches. You are going to make some mistakes, but it's okay. You make mistakes, you learn from it, you move on. Talk to the team, really back them up. For me, a great manager is you are always there for the team. It's less about you. When you continue your journey of your career, it's more about the people. How can you develop them? How can you activate their potential? They might not be able to see the potential they have, but you being there before, identify that, support them in through the development, getting to the place they want to go to. Impact and influence, support one individual at a time. If one day you look back and see the journey you've gone through and those individuals get to the place they want to get to, I think that's such a fulfillment feeling for myself.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. I love that. Fiona, I'm so grateful we were introduced and grateful that and honored that you came on the Corporate Couch today.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
What about Fiona? Wow,
Man.
she first guest from born in China. And like I said, when I met her in person, she's just this small, I'm going to say 4'11", 4'10", powerhouse though, energy. She saw me from across the room and just came right up to me, and you could just feel her energy at the same time.
Yet she was too short to be a diplomat.
Right. Like, why do they have it? Why do they have a height requirement? Yeah, because you have to look like big in stature or something. Like, can you be too tall to be a diplomat?
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. But I mean, such an interesting journey in terms of out of college, she became a English teacher in China, teaching English to Chinese students, I believe. And then her first business job was crazy. She started the China division of that company, and she had all these responsibilities. Like, it was crazy. And she wasn't even a business major in college, I don't think. No, it was a language. She loved language. It was English and something else. So yeah, and then just the career progression and the stuff she had done was just amazing. And really, her talking about change management, it was like a mini class in like how to do great, big projects, big initiatives, and manage change, because people hate change. And saying I get people involved early in the design and the selection of the tools, consistent communication and regular communication of the project. She was fun.
And that's how Chinese people are. They are so direct. They're so efficient.
I think the raw tape just the raw banter that I hand over to my great producer, you, Joe, I think it was like 51 minutes.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Short, concise.
Because you would ask her a question, and she would answer it, and then that was it. I actually did very little editing on this. You know, there wasn't very much that I needed to cut out or anything. There wasn't any fluff to it because she was so direct and right to the point. So it was very interesting in that regard. You know, one of the things that I see a lot in these, I am just obsessed with people who are bilingual, where English is not their native language, but they can speak it almost as if it was. And she certainly had no problem with that, because I'm also interested in how they do that and how do they pick up on all the cultural influences that go along with the language, not just the syntax and things like that, you know, but how do they pick up on culture? And you barely touched on it a little bit in the interview, where she was talking about the analogy in football of needing a quarterback in football. And I thought that was a very interesting insight that she had.
Yeah, she basically said it was her in her mind, she called it the quarterback concept, which she later found out as the title and the responsibilities became more popular, and you know, it's now known as chief of staff. You know, so but she called it the quarterback.
She called it quarterback, and it worked.
Yeah,
it worked.
Right.
And I always think, you know, I've had several different foreign languages. There's a little bit of training. I'm not close to being bilingual at all, but I can appreciate it as a concept. I always think about, what if it was reversed? What if I was in a foreign culture, like in India, for instance, where the prominent sport is cricket, and I had to come up with the analogy of a quarterback. You know, who is the quarterback in cricket? I don't
no idea.
I don't know. Yeah. They don't pitch. They bowl. They're and so what we would think is a pitcher is a bowler. That much I know. So I get 1 point for knowing that much about Indian cricket. I am always in awe of people that can pick up on things like that and then use them that way. I thought it was a very interesting interview. I was tickled to death to be a part of it.
Joe, any parting thoughts for our listeners?
Yeah. You know how you're always telling me how I need to work on my networking skills, right? So last night I had coffee with a spider.
Really?
Yeah. And he was a really interesting guy, actually. He's a web designer.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.